So if you're a massive elite dangerous nerd like I am, you've no doubt at some point thought about getting yourself a HOTAS. And you've probably looked at a couple of different options, from the cheapy ones like the PlayStation and Xbox convertible ones that do work on PC, and you've probably looked at the massively expensive Warthogs and things that you basically need to mortgage your house for. What we're looking at today is pretty much the mid-range one, with a separate throttle and stick. They do have to buy these separately, and funnily enough, the throttle is actually far more expensive than the stick itself. But we'll see why in a minute. Now, the throttle itself is very large and robust, and it feels very premium when you're using it. As you'll see on the side here, there are 3 toggle switches and 1 button. All of these are programmable, of course. The 3 toggle switches feel very nice and clicky, and the top one is actually an 8-way hat switch rather than a 4-way switch like the other 2. Your hand rests very comfortably on it, whether you've got your wrist raised off the control platform slightly or whether you have it resting down. Either one is very comfortable. Your index finger controls the thumbstick, which feels quite springy, not spongy at all, has a very nice solid return spring, and even though I didn't actually show it on this video, it actually has a button if you click it in, just like if you've played with an Xbox One or PS3 controller, it works the same way. The other thing I will say about it is that it's a bit difficult to try and get straight up and straight down motion. For example, in Elite Dangerous, I use it for my vertical and lateral thrusts, but it's hard to aim exactly dead straight up because it is on a strange angle compared to the rest of your hand. So that's just one thing to note. So next to that is on your middle finger is a up and down toggle. It only has 2 functions, one up, one down. You can obviously program them to whatever you like. Next to that, very boring, but 2 buttons each, one for the ring finger, one for the pinky. Next to the pinky as well, you'll see a dial. Now in Elite Dangerous, I haven't mapped it to anything, but in flight sims, you can usually map that to your trim, and it actually works very nicely. It's smooth, it's easy to operate, easy enough even with the pinky. But you can move your hand off to the side if you're flying for a long time and adjust it. At the front there is a rudder. Now this rudder, again in Elite Dangerous, is not particularly useful, but in other flight sims is very useful as a rudder. The stick also has its own rudder, as you'll see in a minute. But the rudder is very smooth. You can operate it from the front or the back, and you can also use it as a toggle switch just for clicking across. Now the main event of the throttle is actually the bit that I don't like all that much, which is the slide. Now your mileage may vary, but my slide is a little bit sticky. And what I mean by that is when you're going from 0 thrust to full thrust, it's a nice smooth motion. But if you're trying to make very accurate, minute adjustments to your thrust, it's a bit jumpy. It's a hard to describe feeling. Imagine sliding your hand across a rubbery surface. It sort of catches and releases, catches and releases. It is solvable to an extent with a ton of lube, but obviously be wary with what lube you use on electrical products and whether it might degrade your components. So just be careful of that, but it might be something that you may want to consider for your own HOTAS as well. It's not a deal breaker, it's just something to note. Now to the stick itself. Now what I would say first of all is that the stick is probably perfectly serviceable by itself for Elite Dangerous, and you'll see in a moment that you can achieve most of the functionality with just the stick alone. So starting down the bottom, there is actually a full throttle slider which goes all the way to the bottom to the top, and you can obviously program that however you like, whether that's just forward thrust or forward and reverse as a combination. If you use the stick by yourself, obviously you can access the buttons on the left hand side a bit more easily, whereas using the right hand, you don't really want to go over to the other side. You just want to stay with the right buttons if you can avoid it. But there are 12 buttons on the base in total, all programmable to whatever you want to do. But reaching around with your right hand is a bit cumbersome, especially if you're playing in virtual reality. You pretty much can't see where those buttons are. But if you're playing with right hand on the stick and left hand on the buttons, then there's heaps of buttons accessible, programmable to whatever you like, and you can obviously access the throttle with your left hand while your right hand controls the stick. So that's a good option and a nice cheap option for someone if you don't want to go for the full throttle and stick setup. The one thing that I will say is absolutely fantastic about the stick is the grip. It is extremely comfortable, very ergonomic. Your hand rests very comfortably where it is. The thumb rest is excellent. Even if you keep your finger on the trigger the entire time, it is not uncomfortable in any way, shape or form. And the hand rest at the bottom of the hand holds your hand up perfectly well. The whole thing feels very solid. after several hundred hours of play with it, it still feels just as solid as ever. It's a great feeling stick. So the top of the stick has got just 3 programmable buttons and an 8-way hat switch, which again you can use for whatever you like, but in ED I try to put the 8-way hat on power management. Now the trigger itself feels fantastic as well. It's a lovely pistol trigger which you can operate from the very bottom to the very top. It's just a single click switch, so there is no dual function switch or travel or anything like that. It's just a basic binary on and off. The one really good thing about it is that, well, firstly, it's very comfortable to rest your finger on and you'll know when you've pressed it, so you can't really accidentally press it. But you can also stick your finger in underneath the trigger as a sort of manual safety if you want it to be super safety sure not to anger the system authorities. And just here's another side view of operating the buttons up the top, which probably looks more uncomfortable than it actually is. It's very comfortable to operate all the buttons with your thumb. Now, one bit of the stick that you may or may not like, I find it quite gimmicky and I haven't worked out a way to switch it off, is that whenever you move the stick around, a little orange glow appears at the bottom, which again, if you're an Elite Dangerous fan and you like your orange, which I'm not in that camp, but if you do, then you'll like a little bit of orange glow on your desk. Again, if you're playing in VR, you obviously won't be able to see it, but if you're just playing in pancake version, well, then you'll at least be able to see a little bit of orange glow, which will probably help with your immersion, but in a very dark environment, it becomes quite bright. Now the travel on the stick is actually fantastic. It feels very good. You can program it using the targeting software, and you can put in accelerations and dead zones and whatever else you like. Very involved if you want to get to that level. The stick also has its own inbuilt rudder, and as you can see here, it's super easy to manipulate. Because of the way the thumb rests, you can pretty much operate the rudder to the right just by pushing forward on the thumb, and the rudder to the left just by pushing forward on the trigger finger. And you may have seen on the box there, it says that it's ambidextrous, this controller, so it in fact is. So these panels that you see here with the rubberized grip, firstly, very comfortable, but you do get in the box little snap out bits that you can change the orientation of the stick or take them off if you don't like them and just have a sleek stick on both sides, whatever you want to do. So you can turn it from a right hand stick to a left hand stick with just snapping out those little rubberized bits and turning around the hand rest. So overall thoughts, this thing does exactly what it says on the box. It is a third of the price, generally, depending on where you buy it, of something like a Warthog, and it does an admirably good job of being a beautiful HOTAS for your Elite Dangerous experience. The only downside, well, apart from the sticky thrust slider that I've mentioned already, is the target software that comes with it. Now, if you wanted to spend hundreds of hours working out all the intricacies of the targeting software, I'm sure you'd get a lot out of it. But for someone who wants to just plug the thing in and start playing ED or your favorite flight sim, it's a little bit cumbersome and a little bit daunting to begin with. And I found that if you keep starting up the target software before you start up your game, it tends to delete your profiles. So once you've started it up once and got yourself locked into a way you want to play, just leave it like that and do everything from within the game itself. The other thing I found, games like Microsoft Flight Simulator struggle with, at least the Steam edition, struggle with the two different input controllers. So because the throttle and the stick are two separate controllers, you just need to make sure that you play games, or that you set up the games to recognize that there are two different controllers going into the one set of inputs. So some games do struggle with that. Elite is not one of those, and it recognizes it very easily, and it works almost straight out of the box once you run your target software the first time. So would I buy this stick again if I hadn't bought it the first time? Yes, I would. But just knowing that the targeting software is so cumbersome for me, I'm not a computer expert by any means, so maybe if you are, it'll be easier for you, but for me, I found it a bit of a struggle. Overall though, the hardware aspect of the HOTAS is fantastic. I can't really fault it for the price range and for what you get in the box. It's an absolutely fantastic product and will enhance your Elite Dangerous experience to no end. You pretty much won't know yourself as an ED player once you've played with this HOTAS. So that's about it for my thoughts. I hope that's been helpful. Take care of yourself and fly safe, Commanders.